Welcome to Guy Talk, conversations on life, work, and love for the modern maverick.
Hello and welcome back to Guy Talk episode 5. Today on the call we're joined by Thom Carey. Thom is a men's dating coach and a Tantra practitioner, and he's currently the head mentor for the Way of the Amorata 90-Day Challenge, which is an Ars Amorata course. So I wanted to get Thom on the podcast today because I met up with him a couple of years ago at an Ars Amorata convention, and he struck me as a guy that doesn't mess around when it comes to going after what he wants. In 2014, when I met up with him, he had recently gone through a divorce, and this caused him to start quite an intense period of inner reflection into why he was living the way that he was, why he was in his job, and his job at the time was a senior leader within a very large Fortune 10 corporation in the States. And it was also during this period of reflection that he reached out and met up with Thom Carey, who's the founder of the Ars Amorata. And ultimately, after these meetings with Thom, he decided to leave his job, and he began an adventure in which he could set his sights to the horizon and explore the principles of the Ars Amorata philosophy, which in essence is living a life governed by beauty, adventure, romance and seduction. So during these last 3 years, he's travelled through the States, to Romania, Colombia and Panama, and has ended up settling in Boulder, Colorado, where he's become initiated into the world of Tantra, and he's also met his current partner. So whilst on his travels, he realised that the men and the women that he was meeting were really impacted and inspired by his stories of adventure and romance. And so he began his own coaching practice to share his insights with others, especially on what he learned about living true to himself, and also what he learned through his relationships with women. So today on the call, we're going to be discussing these 3 years of adventure and travel and how they've impacted Thom. We're going to be discussing the challenges and the personal growth that he has experienced. And we're also going to be touching upon this concept of the hero's journey and how it ties into the concept of a man of excellence, which is the running theme throughout this podcast series. And so it's an absolute pleasure to have you on board, Thom. Thanks very much for joining us.
Sam, thanks so much for the intro, and I'm really excited to be here and to talk to you guys.
So you've been on quite an adventure, Thom. My first question is, what initially inspired you to renounce your corporate job?
Well, it started off kind of slow. It's not like I woke up on day 2 of getting separated from my ex-wife and said, all right, I've got to quit everything else that is going good in my life and head off into the unknown. It just started slowly. I was having trouble dating, and as you mentioned in my intro, I was aware of Ars Amorata and Thom Carey. That was a really inspiring message to me, and I met up with his coaches in Colombia for the 9-day special, which is the same type of special where I met you at in Boulder. And I just saw such a stark difference in the lives that my friends and your friends Jordan and Canute were living in Nico. They were surrounded by beautiful women in Colombia, South America, and they just seemed well-centered and cool guys to hang out with, and we're in the Andes Mountains, and I was just surrounded by so much beauty, the people that I was hanging out with, and then also just the beauty of the earth, that I'm like, what am I doing with my life? I'm making a lot of money, I'm a successful professional, but I sit in a cubicle all day. This is not right. I've made a misstep somewhere. So about 3 weeks after that trip, I got back to work, and I was just sitting in a meeting talking about businessy stuff, and I just could not pay attention at that meeting, and it just something bubbled inside me, and instead of pushing it away, I just said, screw it, I'm quitting my job. I've got to. And I made that decision there. It didn't happen until about 4 months later, but I made that decision on that day. I've got to follow whatever's bubbling up inside me, and I have to go find out, how do I live a life that's similar to what I've seen is possible when I was in Colombia.
And wow, and this wasn't just some job. You were a company senior professional for a Fortune 10 company?
Right. It's hard to describe. It was such a large company, so I wasn't this huge vice president type of guy, and like making millions of dollars or anything like that. But for someone in their 30s, I was doing pretty well, especially coming from I used to be in the military, and I was making plenty of money to pretty much live a happy life and really never worry about poverty or never worry about where my rent check or where my any type of food was coming from. And I was really enjoying it. It's not like I was a guy that hated my job. It was just compared to the beauty that I had seen elsewhere in the world, it was a little more gray. So I really did enjoy what I was doing.
Great. And where have you actually been on this journey then in the past, what is it, three years now?
About 3 years. I didn't do the whole gypsy caravan thing where I'd live in a lot of different places for years and years, like some of our friends have. But in 2014, I went pretty much everywhere that I could while maintaining that full time job. I met you in Boulder. I hung out in Colombia for about a week. Me and some of my friends went to Panama for another week. I met Zan in Bucharest, hung out with him for a week, and then I started a course with Jamie Smart in London, and I showed up in London for a few weeks at a time. That so not everywhere. I wouldn't call myself a world traveler, but it's definitely way more than where my simple life in Richmond, Virginia was taking me.
And how do you see yourself changed now in compared to where you were when you started off on this journey?
It's a good question because I feel like at this point in my journey, I'm at the end of an arc of it, or nearing the end of an arc. Not I intend to be on some type of hero's journey and growth exploration for the rest of my life. But I feel that I'm about to close a chapter of a part of my journey, and that's given me a lot of time for reflection. And some of that is how am I? I'm asking that question all the time. How am I different? And in some ways, I'm so similar to how I was in 2014. I'm just I'm more of the same, but I'm also a completely different guy. It's this weird duality that I'm holding inside myself. So at the core of me, I know that I'm a kind person, and I'm kind of a nerd. I love comic books and playing video games. I love weird comedy improv. A lot of my likes and desires are very similar, but I'm also just so much more sure of myself and confident of myself. And I know that I can transverse into so many different situations, whether it's with women or back in the business world or with friends or even doing somewhat professional relationships like you and I have. I feel like I can get into anything and speak my truth with so much more confidence that even if a business associate or a woman doesn't like what I have to say, I'm not going to crumble anymore. I'm not going to back away from it. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that's coming to mind for me right now.
So let's talk a bit more about this hero's journey because it's a fantastic topic. So for the listeners that maybe haven't heard of a hero's journey before, what does it mean to you? What is this hero's journey?
It's I was first introduced to the concept, oddly enough, through Zan, and I didn't know how big it was until I started reading Joseph Campbell's book, The Hero of a Thousand Faces, and I feel kind of silly resonating so much with this concept of the hero's journey, and I haven't even finished the whole book. But it's just when I'm reading something like that, or when I'm reading The Alchemist, I see this idea that all of our stories, all of our myths, everything from Indian mythology to Greek and Norse mythology, different religions throughout the world, and then even Western stories as of the 19th and 20th century, like Star Wars. All of these follow the exact same arc that a lot of us are going through. And it's I don't want to get into the whole Joseph Campbell theory and talk theory, but I'll talk a little bit about how my life has followed into this and why it means so much to me. Is this idea of the call to adventure. And I've noticed so far, almost every single person you've interviewed on this podcast so far has heard this. They felt something bubbling up inside them that seemed like a call to adventure, and they took that first step, and they went off into the unknown and did whatever they needed to do. And it hasn't been completely easy, but they knew that if they didn't go, their life would probably end up not being as luscious and full as it is now. So you hear this call to adventure, you get put through a number of different tests, you meet, for lack of a better word, you meet gurus and leaders and other adventurers on this path, and you learn a whole lot. You probably go through this period of massive expansion, which I did in 2014 and 2015. I was learning so much. I was dating so many women, and I was having the time of my life. And then you come to the summit, to me, which is you've learned almost as much as you're going to learn for that part of your path, and then that's when the new trials take place. That's when you you start getting tested. You're like, okay, you can't just be a lost boy forever. You've got to take this knowledge back and bring it back into the world. You've got to teach other men. You've got to integrate this into a life with your girlfriend, or integrate this into your dating life if you don't have a girlfriend. And that's not always going to be easy. You know, the original renouncements that one made during the call to adventure, there's consequences to that. And for my example, I went from making more than six figures a year to less than a tenth that amount. And it's just, how do I pay the bills now? I've got all of these great superpowers that I just learned over the last 2 years. And so what? I've got to also live in the real world. And so to me, that's another part of the hero's journey that I've been going through over the last year, basically. And that too is part of the trials that we learn, and we learn how to defeat our greatest demons, more so internally than externally. And at the end of it, we come back as not a guru or anything like that, but you come out as a hero, someone that I've learned a bunch of things that I can teach other people, and I'm humble enough to know from the last year that I'm still a student, and I'm going to be a lifelong student. So it's kind of integrating all of these things into one. What's the final project called? One thesis, basically. Here's my thesis on the hero's journey, and I'm living it rather than writing it out.
I'm just curious, Tom, what was your initial motivation for starting this journey?
It was mostly loneliness. In addition to what I told you about just seeing the life that these other guys were living, and comparing that to my own. But I really ended up in Colombia to begin with, because the divorce that I went through really, really impacted me. I was a type of guy that I can call it ego, where I really thought I had it all together. I had a great job, I had a great wife, a nice house, and all of the things that society would say are perfect. And then I get divorced, and that was a really, really shitty time for me. And I realized how much of my confidence was tied to the externalities of my life, and that just kind of crumbled me back down to zero. And so that's how I started. And what's funny is, to me, that's what the hero's journey is learning all of those things that I was building my confidence on. Those were false gods, and the real confidence that I was looking for was more inside. And so now I can get back into a situation like that. I could get divorced again. I'm not married yet, but I've got a really great relationship now. But something could happen to my relationship, and I haven't imagined that I'm not going to crumble to the floor like I did the last time that happened.
So it sounds to me that the impetus or the motivation for embarking on this journey was to find yourself. And finding yourself, for me, is quite an ambiguous term, but it sounds like this is an issue of self-love. So it's leaving this environment to strip off all the layers and really find out, who am I? What's important to me? Is that about right?
Yeah. And what's funny is, it didn't. That's what I would say right now. It totally makes sense. I mean, I say after 3 years of doing this that I left on the journey to find myself and to find self-love. But at the time, it did not look like that. It seemed so much more surface and young, for lack of a better word, and egotistical. Where it's just, I just wanted to be with a lot of women, and I wanted to be this cool guy. And so it looked way more immature. My initial intentions, and I think that's totally okay, because there's probably people listening right now to the podcast that are just like, well, like, that's not for me. I don't really care about the spiritual journey, and I don't want to find myself. I just want to do a little bit better in my job, or I want to be a man of excellence, however that means to them. And my journey might sound totally different. So I want to say that, initially, I still am not, but I definitely was not then a perfect guy, this type of role model. And yeah, I started out just to get girls.
So it sounds like this hero's journey, it can come in many forms. It doesn't necessarily need to be in pursuit of a goal. So the way I hear it is that a hero's journey may be becoming that Olympic athlete and being the best 100-meter runner in the world, but it also may be finding out that you're meant to be a gardener. So it sounds to me that this idea of a hero's journey is absolutely applicable to everyone, and it's essentially finding out what feels right in terms of the path that you're on.
Yeah, I totally agree, because I know with our group of friends, there's this huge impetus to go be a traveling gypsy, and go live out of a backpack for as long as you possibly can. And I know not everyone resonates with that. There's some guys and maybe some women that are listening to this that have families, and they love their job, and they are in the corporate world, and they love what they do, and they just can't leave, and so they don't have to hear stories like this and say like, well, I'm not doing something right. My new journey right now is to get back into the corporate world. I loved what I did, and that's what I'm planning to do. And I don't feel like that makes me a hypocrite by advocating traveling and adventures so much, because I'm that type of nerd that I have adventures in meetings, in corporate meetings, and making PowerPoints and getting stuff done. And I have no shame in that. I really love it. And it might sound crazy to a lot of people, but I also do want to tell that guy who wants to be a janitor or a painter or a comic book writer or whatever that is, that their journey, it's still going to look very similar to all of our journeys.
Let's talk a bit about the Ars Amorata. So what's the Ars Amorata done for you, and how do you live through the philosophy of the Ars Amorata?
It's a loaded question, because the Ars Amorata to me, and specifically, even before then, in 2008, before I met my wife, I had been a huge fan of Zan's, and I loved his old DVDs, and even now, I mean, he's a good friend of mine, and he's we don't talk very often, but whenever we do, he always has some types of words of encouragement, or something that he can impart to me that really helps me out. So without looking at any bullet points or any marketing or anything like that, I get two things, maybe three, from Ars Amorata, which is one, it to me, and I don't know if this is to Zan, but like the way that I interpret it is that it's about the hero's journey. The 90-day program that I'm helping mentor right now, it is a 90-day journey of starting a life journey. And it's about learning, who we are, and being curious about the world and curious about the women and beauty around us. So one, I see the hero's journey, and two, it really is about loving women and really appreciating them, and seeing the beauty in the women in our lives. And that's not just necessarily our lovers and our girlfriends and the women that we want to hook up with, quote unquote, but it's our family members, and like seeing the beauty. And that we're recording this the day after Mother's Day, seeing the beauty and appreciation of our mothers, and the old checkout lady at the grocery store. And to me, it's brought so much more beauty in my life. I go out into nature now a little bit more, and I just see the trees and grass more beautifully, because my girlfriend, she's just like a mud princess. She loves going out, taking her shoes off, and walking around in the dirt. And just the way that she sees the world is helped improve my life in a certain way. So those are the two things, which is, I'm finding my journey, and I'm finding myself as a man. And part of that is appreciating the beauty that's around me. And that's primarily with women, but it's really just learning how to live a life of real integrity and power. But like, to me, it's a very experiential type of philosophy.
So now moving on then to this theme of a man of excellence. For those of you that have met Thom, will know that he's quite a rounded chap, and he seems to always have quite a lot going on. From marine life to business, Tantra workshops, and now coaching as well. So, Thom, in your eyes, what does a man of excellence look like for you?
One, before I go on, I've got to correct you. I was not in the Marine Corps, because I know some of your listeners probably are in the Marine Corps and know that I wasn't. I was in the Coast Guard. So I don't want to get beaten up if I ever ran into some of the other guys I know who are your friends. but to a man of excellence, aside from U.S. Marines, are to me, it's the number one thing that's coming up is just being standing in your truth and integrity and making the hard choices. And that ranges anything from you're on a date and you might be afraid to tell a girl how you feel about her, and then just saying that regardless if it makes any sense or not. But that also comes into those big things like that your call to adventure and making a big renouncement. If you feel that you need to do something, if you're in a job that you don't love, this is where I do say it. Why are you in this job? Why are you in this relationship that you don't love? Why are you in this job that you don't love? Do renounce those things if it's not part of your integrity. And so it's really holding to your truth even in the hard times. That's excellence to me, and that's going to really be a guiding light through almost any situation that you get into.
Fantastic. I love this concept of integrity, and it's one that we're going to be covering in upcoming episodes. I'm just thinking, in your own journey, have there been any standout moments where your integrity has come into question?
Yeah, you know what? This is odd because I love my my girlfriend with all of my heart right now. But what's funny is we broke up a number of times because at that place in my journey, when I first started dating her, I was very much into exploring polyamory and just dating as many women as I could. And while I loved her a whole lot, my lifestyle at the time just really wasn't working for her. So there was these times where I had to make some hard choices, and she had to stand in her integrity and make hard choices and say, when you're dating these other women, I'm not feeling seen. I'm not feeling cared for. Or, we don't have the type of agreements that we need. It's been over a year since we had our last breakup at the time, so I don't remember the exact arguments, but it's something that I don't regret. It was incredibly painful because I loved her so much, but it's just, I said I have to stand on my integrity. I want to explore these areas of my life right now, and I've got to stand towards this. And she did the same thing, and we were broke up for a few weeks. And and then I kept exploring, and then I realized eventually, how great she was for me, how great of a girlfriend she is, and we got back together. And the reason I say that, it's not just like, oh, we broke up and then got back together. It's that I don't regret having broken up because I was in my integrity and I was in my truth, and I respect her too because she was in her integrity and in her truth. And previously she wasn't. She loved me enough, but didn't want to. She didn't want to lose me, so she bent what she felt her rules were a little bit, and it just didn't feel great for us. So now we've gone through those, and we actually have met in the middle. I understand where she's coming from. She understands where I'm coming from, and it's because of we were so intent on speaking our truth to one another. We know so closely what we do and do not want out of a relationship, and we can grow together from a very similar standpoint.
Sounds like as long as you know your own principles as a man, and you know when you're being crossed, then you can be a man of integrity and show up powerfully. That's what I'm hearing here. Fantastic. Well, Tom, unfortunately we've run out of time. It's been fantastic having you on today. As a passing thought, is there anything that you're dealing with at the moment, any particular challenge that you'd like to share with us before we close?
Yeah, you know what? We didn't really get to that, but I did want to mention, and I mentioned the challenges of the hero's journey. Which is to me, I've spent, so I'm a dating coach. I'm like some consider me a well put together guy. I've got my head in order, but I've actually spent not very very recently, but in the winter, this last winter, I spent almost the entire time in a very very dark depression, and a lot of that was just me dealing with all of the consequences that I had in my life that led up to joblessness and doing a job search and questioning my worthiness as a man. And I spent 2 years working on myself and how do I be great in my relationships and talk to women. And so I've got this great skill set, and who cares? Who cares that I'm also a good coach when in reality, I just want to go, do PowerPoints for a big corporation over here. And I just really thought I was just going to die in poverty and alone. And again, I was back to that old mindset that these other things outside of me were going to make me happy, but I was really letting it impact me. And to me, that too is still part of the hero's journey, because as I was feeling it, and I was doing my best not to numb it out with video games and drinking. I did that a little bit, but the more I looked at these stories that I was telling myself, and just letting them impact me, and feeling what these stories were telling me, I eventually got to the other side of it, and it felt like, to me, depression was a fire that was burning off the impurities, and the impurities that I had were just so strong that it lasted for a while. But I wanted to say that, to me, it's part of the journey also, and it's not like a fluke. And yeah, I mean, and that's just a challenge. I mean, even today, I'm waiting for a call from a business to offer me or not a job. And right before this call, I was just freaking out, trying not to chain smoke cigarettes. But um, it just lets me know, as far as I've come on this journey, I have a lifetime of things to learn from, and friends to make, and beauty to see, and challenges to overcome. And I feel that as I overcome this challenge, I'm going to be so much more of a stronger man than if everything was so easy for me. So that's something I appreciate, and I'm still struggling with.
I really appreciate that share. Thank you so much. And Thom, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. If the listeners would like to reach you, how could they do that?
There's two things. One, just find me on Facebook. I'm just Facebook, Thom Carey, ThomCarey. That'll either point you to my Facebook public page or my personal friend page. But I'm not doing personal one-on-one coaching anymore. So I do want to plug this, that the only way to reach me right now and get coaching or anything right now with me is through the Ars Amorata 90-day course. I'm currently leading one that'll be ending in August, and I'll probably be leading another one in September or October. So if you want more information on that, it's arsamorata.com/Thom, Thom. And you might have the links there, but I don't want to spell Ars Amorata. It's fake Latin. It's hard to spell. So, but yeah, more information on that is through there. And, I'd love to talk to anyone that'd be interested in that course, or even just hit me up on Facebook.
And listeners, you can contact me at my new website, which is samturnertalks.com. And my email address is samturner93@yahoo.co.uk. So thanks again, Thom. It's been an absolute pleasure. And until next time, listeners, bye-bye.